In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to navigate through those final few weeks leading up to your HYROX race and competition so that you don't waste any time, effort, and so that you can ultimately peak and be in the best physical and mental condition that you can be for your competition. I'm Steve Collins, an online health and performance coach helping athletes reach their full potential. Let's dive in. Now, HYROX is demanding. It covers all aspects of health and fitness: aerobic conditioning, strength, power, fitness, speed, mental fortitude. And if you're watching this, most likely you have been training for a few weeks, a few months in preparation for your competition. No doubt you've been putting a lot of time, effort, and energy into the preparation. Really important now that you don't mess it all up in those last few weeks. Okay, so let's get started. First of all, we've got to get one thing clear. Your best physical peak condition is not going to be maintained all year round. Did you get that? Let me say that again. Your best physical peak condition is not going to be maintained all year round. And if it can, you have another level of performance that you just have not unlocked yet. Now, HYROX combines multiple different physical qualities such as aerobic endurance, max strength, lactic acid endurance, strength endurance, and max speed and power. Now, yes, each of these physical qualities you're going to need to train for your HYROX race. However, there is a slight caveat. And that caveat is that each specific quality has a different taper, peak, and deload associated with it. Think of them all as having different use-by dates. Just like the milk in your fridge, just like the banana sitting in your fruit bowl. There's a use-by date that has to be used by. So first up, let's go through each of these qualities, and at the end, I'll summarize it all into how to peak, how to taper, and how to deload each of the qualities. So first up, the most important quality to train is, of course, your aerobic endurance. You'll have to build this up over time. However, once it has been established and developed, it's very, very easily maintained. And the cool thing about that aerobic endurance is that you can actually maintain it in 30 days. So when you're 30 days out, aim to be at the level of fitness you want to be going into your competition at. And when you're about 2 weeks out, any more aerobic conditioning that you do isn't going to have a massive transfer over to your competition. So certainly 30 days out, you need to be as fit as you want to be going into your competition. This is a quality that we want to taper up over time towards your competition. And then in that final week out, we want to start tapering back down again. And over those 5 to 7 days, you can also manipulate your nutrition, your diet, in particular your carbohydrates, to improve your gains even more. And trust me, it's not as complicated as it sounds. I've actually done a video. You can check that out up here. I think it's towards the back end of that video, 10, 12, 13 minute mark, where I talk about how to carb load. So aerobic endurance, pretty simple. Next up, we have max strength. Now, you're going to need maximal strength on most of the stations, and the greater level of maximal strength you have, the easier your stations will be. So just like aerobic endurance, you're going to be able to maintain your level of maximal strength for 30 days. Which means that if you haven't lifted a heavy weight in 30 days, 1 month out, you should be able to maintain that maximal strength. And when I'm talking about maximal strength, I'm talking about anywhere between 1 to 5 rep max. Now, depending on your training program and your periodization model, whether you use a linear periodization model or a non-linear periodization model, such as an undulating model, this will dictate where you stop lifting heavier and how early on from your competition and where you deload and where you taper. With my athletes, I like to use a combination of both. But simply for you guys, I would highly recommend to continue lifting those 1 to 3 rep maxes 1 to 3 weeks out from competition. Building towards your competition, say 12, 16 weeks out, you should be taking a deload between 40 and 50% on volume every 4th or 5th week. Next up, we have lactic acid endurance, otherwise known as lactic threshold or anaerobic threshold. This quality is super important for HYROX athletes. Your ability to produce that lactic acid later on in your training, but also buffer it so that you can sustain work, power, and output is critical for HYROX performance. It takes 18 days to lose this quality, which means 14 days out should be the last time you do a big lactic acid based session. I have my athletes do this big lactic acid session 2 weeks out from their competition, because if they're doing it too close to the competitions, they're not going to get the adaptations from that session to help transfer over. And this lactic acid endurance quality is probably one of the most overused qualities for HYROX competitors. It's done far too often, it's done far too much in one session, and it's done far too close to competition. In fact, I would only even recommend and touch this quality when you're about 5 to 7 weeks out. Use it, abuse it, and then get out. So if you're doing a program from these master coaches with repeat sprints, lots of hard, grueling WODs and workouts that are just beating you up, you really need to question it and think, do you actually need that? Because if you continue doing that too much, you will break down, you will get injured, which is very, very common. Surprise, surprise. But you might be thinking, Steve, what do you mean? I have to do these hard workouts. I need to get in the pain cave and do these hard transitions. Yes, of course, you need to expose yourself to transitions and hard work. I just recommend don't overdoing it because we can build this quality out in other ways. Remember, there is a massive genetic component to this quality, and we really do not want to spend too much time and energy in this area. Yeah, this quality will raise your level of threshold, but there are many other ways to do it that are less strenuous, such as increasing your aerobic window. You can watch that video up here on how to do so. One of the biggest problems training that threshold, that lactate system, is that it affects our recovery. It takes a lot of time to recover from it. So what may be a 15, 20, 30 minute really hard workout, the actual recovery time and the recovery units from that workout are way, way more. So when we look at time over the week, you need more recovery time, more recovery units from these short, hard workouts, where you could spend 30, 45, 60 minutes working on that aerobic window, which needs less recovery from. So for time, it may feel better in the workout, working systemically, but for over the week and the training units, you have to spend more time focusing on recovery and restoration techniques. And the risk of injury goes up as well because you're working hard and you're beating the body up, high intensity training. So it's not a right or wrong thing. You just got to choose your battles wisely depending on your training experience, your training age, your aerobic fitness, and your injuries. If you're 40 and you have a full-time job and you have a family and maybe you've been injured in the past, doing sprint repeats and these hard, long, grueling workouts and training twice a day, you don't need to be doing it. Train smarter, not harder sometimes. So that's 18 days before you lose those lactic acid endurance gains. I mentioned earlier that if you can maintain these qualities all year round, then you just have another level of performance that you haven't tapped into, that you just haven't unlocked yet. If that sounds like you, this is exactly what my expertise is in. If that sounds like something you want and need right now, you want to be coached by me, there is a link in the description below. Next up is a huge importance for HYROX athletes, and that's strength endurance. Strength endurance is simply the ability to continue exerting force for a significant amount of time. It's what HYROX athletes really need, not just on those stations, the sled push, the sled pull, the burpees, the lunges, but also on those rowers and ski ergs. It takes 15 days to lose those gains, which means you'll have to do one of these sessions 2 weeks out from your competition at least. Now, I like my HYROX athletes with that strength endurance work, we still keep it in, however, we have a deload on what we're doing. Instead of doing 5 or 6 sets per muscle group, we may do half. So we reduce it by 50%. And we really stress and emphasize the posterior chain, the calves, the hamstrings, the lower back, the glutes, and the upper back. Also really important to note is that we don't use exercises in that last 7 days that beat up the body too much. So anything that has a big eccentric component to it, eccentric contraction to it, we try and cut it out. So we may do more barbell step-ups than slow, deep back squats. We may do rack pulls instead of full range of motion deadlifts. There is minimal eccentric component to those lifts, which eccentric contractions make people more sore and it tires out the nervous system. For upper body work, instead of doing overhead barbell presses, we may do jerks and push presses. So not only are those exercises less eccentric focused, they're more speed and power focused and weight focused too, which will help a transfer to speed and power. And of course, we always do more sled work in that final 7 to 14 days because sled work is very concentric based. You can do a lot of it, like high frequency, heavy weight as well, and you won't get too sore. Last up, we have max speed and power. Probably the most underused and undervalued quality to train for HYROX athletes. Max speed and power, you can lose those gains in as little as 5 days if you do not train it. And in some individuals that aren't used to doing this strength and power and speed work, they can lose it within 1 to 2 days. So really important that you train this quality right up until your competition. What I have my athletes do is 1 to 2 days out, they do a short 20 to 30 minute workout. They get in, they get out. What they do is they go through every single exercise. They may do a quick 10 to 20 second sprint. They may do a quick 10 to 20 second row. They may do a 10 to 20 second ski erg. Every single station, everything they have to do, short, explosive, and as fast as possible. They take a long rest period, then they transition across. And then they do it once, they're at the gym. It takes 20 minutes, they're done. What this does, it potentiates the nervous system and fires it up, and you can hold that over 24 hours. Really, really important for your peak week, guys. 1 to 3 days out, I like 24 hours out, to do some explosive work, some potentiation work to get the nervous system fired up, get the body prepared, and even in that, you can work on a little bit of technique at the same time, but just doing it fast. This will really help you compete on the day and be fired up. So just to summarize and make it all clear, deloads with your weight training will be used depending on your periodization model used. My athletes deload every 5th week, for example. Tapers should be focused on with your running volume. You should be tapering your running volume up towards race day and then tapering down over their final week or 2. Your peaking should be used with your strength and power training, high speed and velocity work done right up to 24 to 48 hours out with minimal lactic acid training and running volume. Really, really important, guys. Your lactic acid training should not be done in that last week of training. Okay, it's going to create too much fatigue and you're not going to get a training adaptation and transfer for your competition. This is probably the thing that people mess up the most. You do not need a lactic acid training session 1 to 2 weeks out. You don't need it. Okay, stop wasting your energy and your time. Focus on other areas like technique of running, technique of positions, and work on your strength and power. Guys, if you've made it this far into the video, you're taking your HYROX training and competition seriously, which you should do. For the past few years, I've been helping athletes just like you compete and train in HYROX. But more importantly, setting them up with an individualized plan and support so that they can be looked after in preparation for HYROX. You know, there are far too many of these master coaches out there and HYROX specialists who are just using cookie cutter made programs. And quite frankly, it just doesn't sit well with me. Everyone is unique and deserves a specific individualized approach in their training for their health and performance. You guys do too. If you want to be looked after by a coach who cares and goes beyond and above, then hit me up. There's a link in the description below to an application form. Fill it out, let's book a call, let's catch up, see if we're a good fit, and I'll explain how my online coaching program works. Other than that, thank you for taking the time to watch and listen. Please subscribe, hit the like button, share the video, support the channel. Thank you. See you on the next one.